This episode of Instant Analysis is brought to you by Platinum Storage Group and Real Estate Investments. For USCFootball.com, I'm Keely Eure here with Dan Weber. Instant analysis of Day 9 of the Todd McNair NCAA trial. Today we heard from Roscoe Howard. It was a video deposition, so it was the first time that the jury was really getting a chance to hear from him. He was a public member of the NCAA. For the Reggie Bush case, the USC case, this was his first case that he was sitting in on. He was supposed to be an observer with a no vote power at all, but McNair's lawyers contend that he had some influence on the committee. What were your general takeaways from him? How was he as a witness?
I think it's interesting. He's the third witness that McNair's attorneys have put up, and he's the third witness from the NCAA's point of view who didn't have a vote. Shep Cooper was the liaison, the administrator. He's number one. He didn't have a vote. Rodney Uphoff, he's an observer. The appeals coordinator. And now you get Roscoe Howard, who was a latecomer, just got in, showed up for the January hearing, hadn't read hadn't read the transcript and all that kind of thing, hadn't read the transcripts, was just trying to catch up. So I do think there's a theme being brought out by McNair's attorneys that these three men were really important in the way this decision went, and none of them had a vote. And it's put them into kind of a difficult situation where they have to explain these very strong memos saying and all three of them, Todd McNair is so guilty, and he's a lying no good, shouldn't be around, kids, shouldn't be coaching and all that. And none of them had a vote. And all of them weighed in really heavily toward the end when they couldn't get a decision, and all of them said they don't think it mattered, that nobody paid any attention to them. And the two observers on the committee, Rodney Uphoff and Roscoe Howard, both said they needed to intervene because the people on the committee didn't really exactly understand what they were supposed to do, how to evaluate evidence, how to, really understand NCAA proceedings and all that kind of thing. So I think they're building a case for these are the people who decided what they decided about Todd McNair, and from their own words and the NCAA's own description of what they were supposed to be doing, it doesn't look good for the NCAA from that standpoint. They're saying, what were they doing, there with such strong opinions? When they didn't have a vote, and that's what they keep saying. Oh, we didn't have a vote.
Yeah. Roscoe Howard is a former federal prosecutor, so he made a note in the deposition that he felt he was the most experienced with evidence as far as the committee goes. Of course, he wasn't a part of the committee, but that's what he thought. And so he made sure to, when Bruce said, did you influence the committee? He said, I was just making my position known. He actually wrote a 4.5-page email and sent it to the committee during deliberations that he described as a rant. Roscoe kept saying that he was concerned with evidence, but then when Bruce, Todd McNair's lawyer, kind of pushed further in, Roscoe admitted that he never really read the full transcripts from Lloyd Lake, Todd McNair, Pete Carroll, or Reggie Bush. He only read quotes that were in the case summary, and the case summary wasn't 100% factually accurate either. So you see that kind of contradiction there.
Well, and then even now, to this moment, he can't tell you they made mistakes on the crucial phone call from Lloyd Lake to Todd McNair that they reported and asked about as being from Todd McNair to Lloyd Lake and got the year wrong. He even now can't say he knows that's not correct. It's kind of amazing when you hear somebody say, I'm an expert at evidence, and they had all this evidence that Todd McNair is lying, and they say, well, was he lying about he didn't know, he didn't have a good answer as to a phone call that was asked that he didn't make, and it was in the wrong year? Is he lying when he doesn't give you a straight answer? And he would say something to the effect that, well, the phone call was made. He actually said this. It didn't matter who made it or what year it was made. There was a phone call. Oh, okay. that's good.
Yeah, well, in that sense, Bruce Brolette put up an email where Roscoe said that the record was recklessly constructed, and yet that's what they went off of. How did he answer to that? How do you piece that together?
Well, he said, because in an email, one of the reasons he said that he had to, and Rodney Uphoff had to kind of get involved in this, was he didn't trust the investigators. He didn't think they did a good job, and that they had constructed a record recklessly. And Bruce obviously asked the question, well, then how could you rely on that record to do what you did to Todd McNair? And he said, well, it was adequate. Now, his own email says it was recklessly constructed and you can't rely on it. And then when he's pushed on the stand today, basically said, oh, it was okay. It was adequate. You could use it. Well, it's not what he said during the deliberations.
Yeah. I think the other notable thing to come out today, Roscoe was asked about his opinions of Todd McNair during the deliberations and during that time, and he said anyone who lied as much as McNair did shouldn't be around young, impressionable athletes. How did that kind of play off when he said that in the deposition?
Well, I think it kind of showed somewhat. It showed when you got the whole, his whole feelings about the case. He basically said he got there to Tempe, Arizona. He didn't even know who Todd McNair was. He knew it was about Reggie Bush and USC, but he didn't know about Todd McNair. And you think, wait a minute, you got all this evidence that they piled up yesterday or Friday, 2,700 pages, and you didn't read much of that, or at least certainly didn't read the witness transcripts. And now you're going to portray yourself as an expert on what evidence should be in, what shouldn't be in, and how the committee should evaluate that evidence. And you wanted to make clear that you believe that that Todd McNair was lying from beginning to end on every single thing that came up. He was lying. He said it would have been too big a coincidence. And Bruce tried to point out some of the things where it's obvious that Todd McNair is not lying. He didn't lie about the phone call he didn't get in 2005, and he didn't make it. But they didn't want to hear that.
Mm-hmm. The NCAA, we also heard them begin their interview of Roscoe. We didn't get to finish it. We will finish that tomorrow. Anything notable from that beginning portion of the NCAA's questioning?
It seemed very unenthusiastic. It seemed like, well, could you read the first 4 or 5 lines from your resume, Mr. Howard? And could you read this out of the NCAA rule book? And could you read that? It looked like they knew they had to ask him some questions. And then they basically said, did you try to influence the committee? Did you think you were going to be allowed to ask any questions? Well, that's never been the issue. He said, oh, no, of course not. And did you really try to influence the committee? No, I just wanted to show them what my position was. Yeah. And you think, wait a minute, you got there late, you didn't do much homework, your position was over in the corner, you weren't at the big boys' table when they were considering. They had 2 of you observers over off to the side. And now you want to say, I wanted them to get to know my position. What position? You don't have a position if you explicitly, in a letter to the rest of the committee, the NCAA basically said, Roscoe Howard will be here observing. And they said that he didn't have to work too hard to get up to speed because that's all he's going to be doing. So the letter basically said, no worries, just come and watch and enjoy yourself. And Roscoe said, well, I was a member of the committee. They paid for my airfare. They brought me out to Tempe, so I was really a member of the committee.
Mm-hmm. Like I mentioned earlier, we will be hearing the rest of that deposition tomorrow, and then we'll be hearing a live in-person testimony from Brian Halloran, who was the other public member of the NCAA, but he was actually on the committee. What do we know? What else do we know about Brian?
Well, we know he's from Los Angeles. We know he wasn't supposed to be on this case from what he had been an appeals coordinator, and for some reason he ended up on this case. We know very little about Brian Halloran. He has he's a lawyer, but he's listed as a businessman who has a wind farm out near Riverside. But it's so interesting that here he is on this really important national, committee for the NCAA, and he's from Los Angeles, the only person from Los Angeles, and no one knows, like, who is he? How did he get on this committee? What was he doing there? We're going to find out tomorrow. I mean, I'm really interested too, because, since I realized that there was a Los Angeles guy on this committee, we've tried to kind of find out about who he is or where he's coming from or whatever. He's kind of a ghost. He'll work really well on our notes tomorrow because he's sort of legitimately a ghost.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess we'll find out more tomorrow, but that's going to wrap it up for day 9 of the Todd McNair NCAA trial. For Dan Weber, I'm Keely Eure. For more, check out uscfootball.com.